this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Lowe's knows Sundays are for football, so tackle your home improvement projects by Saturday and earn your Sunday with great deals on LG and Bosch appliances, select Bounty and Swiffer cleaning products, and more. Then once your to-do list is done, get ready to kick back, relax, and enjoy the game. Shop in store or online now and earn your Sunday with help from Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
I'm no web designer, but Wix Harmony kind of makes me feel like one. It's an AI website builder where I just describe what I want and it builds the entire site for me with all the business tools I need. My favorite part, I get an AI agent named Aria who helps me think things through or get stuff done. Wix has been pioneering website tech for 20 years, and they've done it again. Try it for free at wix.com/harmony. That's wix.com/harmony.
Rich man, how was your Father's Day?
Father's Day was great. Super chill. Went to the community pool. Had a nice day. Couldn't be happier. What about you?
It was good. You know, my daughter had a dance competition. She was in nationals. They got second place in her group, in her category. So props to her. We got back from that competition and I got a present from my son, who's 3. Okay. It was one of those laminated sheets that, you know, you answer questions based on what their teachers are asking about your dad. And so, you know, like my dad's name is, and he said daddy for that particular question. And then one of the questions was, my dad is blank years old. And so, you know, usually when kids answer that, they could say, oh, my dad's 110 years old. And then it's funny because, you know, they have no concept of age, or my dad's 8 years old and they have no idea what's going on. But instead, I think that he gave the most insulting answer you could possibly give. He said 52. I'm JJ, and over the last couple of years, I've been doing everything I can to be a best ball bro. And last season, things finally fell into place. I got 40th in the DraftKings Millie contest, taking home $20,000. Maybe I became a best ball bro, but I'm still looking to learn more about this game. And I still want others to come on this ride with me. So even if you consider me a best ball bro, this could be your year. This could be the year that you officially become a best ball bro. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. We've partnered up with DraftKings again this year for Best Ball, and we've got a can't-miss offer on their biggest Best Ball contest ever. $20 million in total prizes. It's draft one, get one. Draft your team once, no weekly lineup management, and your top scorers start automatically each week, all season long. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app and sign up with promo code LATEROUND. Enter a lineup in the $20 million Best Ball contest for $25 and get a bonus ticket for a second entry. 2 shots at the title. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Welcome into another episode of Becoming a Best Ball Bro. I'm JJ Zacharyson, joined as always by Rich Ryan. Rich, what's going on, buddy?
Doing good. It's funny, when you were workshopping that cold open, I let you know this story. When I was younger and my mom was turning 40, my dad told me as a joke that she was turning 50. And of course, I'm talking to all my friends. They're telling their parents. So for the next week or so, every parent is going up to my mom. They're like, Doreen, you look great. You look fantastic. It was such a mean joke by my dad.
Yeah, I mean, like 52 is like the perfect age where it's believable, right? Where like you could understand why someone would be 52 with a 3-year-old. Like that's not an totally uncommon thing. But I'm not that old. Okay, I know some people on Twitter. I've revealed my age before in the past. I'm 38 for the record, everybody. But I've revealed my age before in the past, and people on Twitter have been like, "Oh man." Like some people thought that I was like maybe early 30s or something. But then randomly people are like, "Oh, I thought you were like in your mid 50s and such." And I'm like, do I really come across that way? Do I really present myself as a true middle-aged man? I mean, don't answer that question, actually. You probably don't want to answer that. I think it's the sleeping stuff, you know, the East Coast dad stuff that I complain about.
For sure. You guys got to stay up late for every sporting event. But yeah, when I look in the mirror, I still see the young self. More often than not now, I'm starting to see the older guy, the dad. The guy that's going to be like you, turning 40 in a couple of years. But I still squint and see the young kid that has a lot of heart and a lot of energy.
I don't feel different. than I did. I genuinely like late 30s or like how they felt last generation about the late 20s, in my opinion. Like every generation gets younger. Go look at pictures of your grandparents when they were like 56 years old. They look like they're 190. It's bizarre. I don't understand how or why that happens. Like I look at my dad right now. My dad's in his late 70s, and I look at him right now, and I'm like, man, he's in really great shape. He looks like if my grandparents were like when they were that same age, when they were in their late 70s, they look like they were on their deathbed. Like it's just crazy how each generation just keeps getting younger and younger, and hopefully we us millennials continue that.
It is true. There's a famous roster photo or headshots of like a 91 Penn State team that always pops up on my feed, maybe monthly, and every single dude on that team looks 45. Like I'm like, how are these guys playing college football?
Those like old high school videos that they'll put on like social media sometimes, and you like see like the late 80s, early 90s. I'm like, why is there a 33-year-old that's a senior in high school? This doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah. Yeah. Or basically like any TV show or movie from back then, all the kids look so much older. Anyway, we got to talk a little best ball. Today, my plan is to talk about my top exposures right now, a couple of them at each position through 28 milli drafts. How many milli drafts have you done so far?
I haven't done a single milli yet. I've just been sticking to the $3 1 million prize pool guarantee. But I'm up above a dozen. I'm getting towards I think 20 drafts in that. So I'm holding off my millis and just firing the $3 for now.
Yeah, I had a lot of slows that I had entered right after the NFL draft, but I'm only through 28 milli drafts. Obviously, I'm going to be max entering. So I'm through 28. I think overall, I'm at about, like post-draft, I'm at about 110 or so drafts that are either ongoing or completed. But like I said, I'm going to go through some of my top exposures. I guess I'll just kick it off at quarterback real quick. And I'm going to talk about Malik Willis. Now, I do think that there's some concern maybe about him losing his job late in the season. Like maybe that would happen and they would go down that path like cover your ears, Rich, like a Justin Fields type situation, right? Where there's some hope that because it's not like the most extreme contract in the world for Malik Willis. It's not like they're like locked in for 6 years and they have to play him necessarily. So I do think that there's like maybe some risk that Willis is just not it. And they end up benching him and they want to see what other quarterbacks can do within that offense. And I mean, look, it's a frighteningly bad offense from a personnel standpoint, right? Like it's Devon Achane, and then it's the fact that we're talking about Greg Dulcich as their top drafted player outside of Achane is frightening, right? So I get the downside risk with Willis for sure, but I think the upside risk is similar to what we saw, or the upside potential is similar to like you can use Justin Fields if you want as an example, where like, yeah, you need the passing numbers to really elevate the rushing stuff to be like super relevant in fantasy, but Fields still could give you very usable QB1 production, when he was starting. So I have some notes here about what Willis has done in a small sample. He's had 6 starts. He's averaged 8.5 points per game via rushing in those starts. Now, for context, even if you remove last year's season from Lamar Jackson, where he was under that 4 point per game mark via rushing, he's been at about 8 points per game throughout his career. Lamar Jackson has. So in our very limited sample, 6 starts of Malik Willis, he's given you the same number of rushing points per game as Lamar Jackson has. Now, look, the thing with Lamar that I think just still doesn't get talked about enough, and even Josh Allen, you could lump him in there, but Lamar is obviously looked at as like, oh, he's a cheat code in fantasy because he runs the ball so well, right? And like that's obviously a great floor and upside play. But Lamar Jackson has consistently beaten touchdown rate odds and has been a really efficient thrower in terms of what we look for from a fantasy football perspective, which is, being able to throw for touchdowns and not just run for them, right? And so I think that we have to keep that in mind with like a Malik Willis, is that, yes, if you look at 27 quarterback seasons since 2011 where they had 7 or more PPR points per game, or you don't have to say PPR, they're not catching many passes, but points per game via rushing, only 4 of those 27 seasons ranked outside the top 10 in fantasy scoring at quarterback and points per game. So you have 27 quarterback seasons where the quarterback had 7 or more points per game via rushing. Malik Willis has been at 8.5 throughout his brief, 6 starts. Only 4 of those 27 have ranked outside the top 10 in points per game, which is crazy. But if you look at the players who didn't, it's like the the Anthony Richardson type, right? Where they can get it done on the ground, but their passing is very questionable. That's a very real outcome for Malik Willis, and I understand that in drafting him and taking that on. But I think his ADP is still fairly low given where these quarterbacks are going right now. And then on top of that, the nice part on DraftKings with having those 2 extra rounds, it's a lot easier to make 3 quarterback builds. And so if you're making a 3 QB build, you can get Malik Willis on top of maybe, 2 guys that you get in round 9 and 10, or Malik Willis with a CJ Stroud and then like a Jalen Hurts or something like that. And all of a sudden you have a pretty good trio where there is a lot of that upside that you can capture with Malik Willis's legs. So because of all of that, I am drafting a lot of Malik Willis. I don't know where this will finish and stand, but he's also one of those guys where if you miss out on that quarterback run, he's sitting there very often as an easy player to get.
And Malik Willis won't be affected as much by that market pressure because he is the first person of the stack that's going off the board in round 11, right? The receivers, Washington going off in 14, then Dulcich in 15, and the rest of the guys are in the final rounds of the draft. So there aren't going to be players there aren't going to be players who have drafted receivers on Miami and then need to connect the dot with that stack that are pushing that pressure up. So he should just chill in that round 11 range. What I was going to ask you is, we've seen Greg Dulcich move. He's up 2 rounds since we started potting, and we've spoken about him. Are there which of, if any, of these Miami receivers are you throwing darts at to complete the stack, or is it just Dulcich right now?
No, I mean, like I've thrown random darts at other guys. I started coming in pretty hot with Jalen Tolbert at the beginning of the summer. I haven't really been doing that as frequently because I actually think there's a chance that they just don't want to use him and maybe even like cut him if they just really like the depth that they have. I mean, there's a lot of just random directions that you can go in. Kevin Coleman, even their rookie slot guy, who the Zap model actually liked a decent bit versus where the consensus had him. But, he's kind of limited just as a slot player. I think he's only going to be a slot player at the NFL level. I haven't really drafted much Caleb Douglas just because I'm not that big of a fan of his talent in that profile. So it's really just sprinkling in the wide receivers. I think Dulcich is the easy one to go to. I haven't drafted a ton of Malik Washington either, just because I think the market, it's like odd that the market is so bullish on him being like the guy when the opportunity cost in getting him is actually not insignificant. I mean, it's not significant, in the grand scheme, but it's not insignificant when you're talking about Malik freaking Washington, who hasn't really done anything since he entered the NFL, right? So, I understand why he would be the top wide receiver drafted, from Miami, but I don't understand why it would be such a massive gap as it is right now. Right now it's like 5 or 6 rounds, in those later parts of the draft. So, and I think you can go naked Malik Willis if you want to, right? Where I just showed you his point per game rushing numbers. Like, he's very capable of just scoring a lot of points and maybe not bringing along one of the wide receivers or even Greg Dulcich with him.
Yeah, Malik Washington up 14 spots since we've started this summer. People in love with the presumed, I guess, WR1, but yeah.
I mean, there's been some positive coach speak and talk about Malik Washington, but I don't know. To me, I don't want to like get so bullish on a player that just really hasn't proven anything. I didn't mind him as a prospect. I think he's a good yak guy. I don't think that he's like the most traditional, perimeter wide receiver or X guy that we're going to rely on, or that can find a really consistent place in that offense. So he's fine, but I'm not going to be overweight.
Let's move to another quarterback, another mobile fella up in Philadelphia. Fly, Eagles fly, Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I love where Jalen Hurts goes in these drafts. I think he's just really undervalued. You can even go naked and not get Devontae Smith, especially Mekhi Lemon falling recently in some of these drafts. Like, it's you can even, stack him if you get Hurts. There's Dallas Goedert, there's Dontavian Wicks at the end of drafts that you can go with. Obviously Eli Stowers. So I like Hurts from the standpoint of like, you can be flexible. You don't absolutely need to. And obviously, like, I had a team last night that I drafted, and I drafted Devontae Smith, and then I got Jalen Hurts. So I just got the go-to stack, but I don't think you have to have Devontae Smith. Over the last 5 years as starter, Jalen Hurts has averaged 20 or more points per game in all but one season. That was last year with Kevin Patullo, where he was almost at 19 points per game, which is still not that bad. And that's standard scoring. That's not even DraftKings scoring. He still ranked 8th last year, though, in points per game. Like, he still wasn't like horrific last year as a fantasy quarterback. You don't have AJ Brown anymore. I get it, but you get Mekhi Lemon. You have Dontavian Wicks. You have Eli Stowers. You have a new offensive coordinator. And then the other thing to point out is what I talked about on the Market Score episode yesterday, which is that Market Score loves Jalen Hurts. Like right now, so Market Score, if you guys don't know, Market Score is a metric that Brandon Gadula and I created where we're looking at average draft position and we're looking at other inputs from the previous season to basically give a score of 0 to 100 for a player. And then you can essentially rank players that way if you want to, just based on their overall scores. And Jalen Hurts right now is number 2 in Market Score. He's right above, barely above Lamar Jackson, but he's above Lamar Jackson. That's not how I'm ranking guys, but it is additional context as to, understanding player evaluation and how we should feel about certain players. So Market Score really likes Jalen Hurts, which means it's taking ADP. It's looking at all these predictive metrics around ADP to help predict how well this player is going to perform this year. And it's saying Jalen Hurts is a value right now. So I think he's just undervalued. It's crazy seeing some of these players, like Dak Prescott went above him in the draft I did yesterday, which I get from the standpoint of stacking. And that's why that's happening, because you have multiple inputs in the early rounds with George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb at either end of the draft too, which makes it even more of like this game of chicken with those two teams, because the CeeDee Lamb manager might even reach for Dak in round 6, right? Because like at the beginning of round 6 with CeeDee Lamb going at the end of round 1. But then if he doesn't, or if that drafter doesn't, then you get into that 6-7 turn and the George Pickens manager is sitting there and they're saying, I got to get Dak now because he's not going to fall to the 8th, right? So all that's doing is creating Dak Prescott's ADP to be inflated, right? And it's nothing against Dak. He's fine. But Jalen Hurts objectively has a higher ceiling than Dak Prescott. Like objectively, right? He's objectively a better fantasy asset than Dak Prescott is. So from that perspective, this is what we were talking about. I mean, we talked about it for like a year and a half now, it feels like. But this is why quarterback ADP can get so funky and weird in best ball. And it's so different in season long where we're going to sit here and be like, yeah, we're going to draft Jalen Hurts. We're not even going to care about stacking in our home leagues and stuff. But, hopefully for our benefit, the best ball ADP transfers over to season long, because then we'll be able to get some of these quarterback values. But I don't think that's going to happen the same way. So this is a really good way to get exposure to some of these early round guys. Yeah,
the gravity of stacking it's a thing, right? These quarterbacks, because of the selections that have been made previously, they get pulled into that direction. And like you said, it's very interesting when there's two pieces. We see this with Cincinnati as well, where there's two guys competing for fulfilling that stack later on, which creates this interesting pressure as to when that player comes off the board. Let's go with the running back. Let's go to Denver. Let's go to Jonah Coleman.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm kind of on an island with Jonah Coleman at this point, because I think his ADP has dropped since the draft. So since the Millie opened. And I feel like I'm kind of on an island because I see a lot of people who are J.K. Dobbins bros and R.J. Harvey bros, but there's not many Jonah Coleman bros. And that's not to say that I think Coleman's amazing in that, I'm purely on Team Coleman. I've sprinkled in more RJ Harvey, but I will say I'm not drafting much J.K. Dobbins. I just don't get the allure, especially on DraftKings where it's full PPR. I don't get the allure of J.K. Dobbins that much when he's had injury history, when that Jonah Coleman is stepping in. I think they drafted Coleman. I've said this all along. I think they drafted Coleman because he can kind of back up both players in this backfield. Like he's a do-it-all back who's just good enough at pass catcher. He's good enough in pass protection. He's good enough at the early down stuff and between the tackles. And he's big and he can play the goal line role too. So like he's good enough at all of these things that number one, he can back those guys up. But number two, I also think there's a real genuine possibility that he just carves out a role in the Denver backfield, that Jonah Coleman sees some sort of backfield share with those guys being healthy. RJ Harvey, he's a legit threat as a pass catcher, but not so much as a rusher, just based on what we saw last year with his bottom tiered rushing yards over expected per rush. J.K. Dobbins, like I said, 4% target share last year for J.K. Dobbins, and there's durability concerns. So Coleman being a do-it-all back, it's a good offense that you're attaching him to. I just think he's a good pick right now, and I'm getting him in round 15 consistently now, and that I thought he was going to rise. Honestly, I thought getting him in round 14 after the draft was I thought he would get to like round 12, and he just hasn't. There's been some positive, favorable reports with him too, which is another reason why I'm surprised there hasn't been that much movement with Jonah Coleman. I'm sure people in the comments are going to give me a reason as to why this is happening and why I'm a moron. But I do think that there's a lot of outs for Jonah Coleman to be a useful piece in best ball this year.
Yeah. Sometimes we've seen this time and time again. Sometimes just going with the cheapest option in an ambiguous situation oftentimes is a pretty solid strategy, right? You're getting the cost off. And as we see throughout the summer, which of these Denver running backs could benefit the most from some sort of buzz or news or injury in the summer? It's most likely Jonah Coleman, because like, how high could RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins reasonably go? I don't think it could be much higher than where they're going already.
RJ Harvey's dealing with an injury too. Like there's that's going on. And like I do think that we're doing ourselves a disservice when we lump together day 3 picks and day 3 draft capital as all the same, because like, he was like top 110, Jonah Coleman. He was an early 4th round pick. That is not that much different than a 3rd round pick from a draft capital and an investment standpoint. And for whatever reason, like people, I think that part of it is like people like me, and it's our faults, because when we communicate these ideas, we lump these guys together and say, oh, he's a day 3 pick, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a gradient. It's the same way that I view average draft position and like all the threshold stuff that I work on the draft guide, where, I bucket these players up into top 18 wide receivers, and then, wide receiver 19 to 42 to represent the middle rounds. In each of those groups, there's different trends that we look for to see if a player is going to bust or if they're going to break out. Realistically, though, if you're at the low end of, if you're wide receiver 18, if you're like Tedero McMillan right now, your trends, yes, you might get bucketed in with the top 18 guys. The trends in the next group matter just as much as the one in that group, right? Like it's similar with with draft capital and not having these harsh cutoffs, because a 6th round running back is not the same at all as a 110th or 108th or whatever Jonah Coleman was overall running back. Jonah Coleman's ADP or draft capital is not that far off from like what Caleb Johnson was last year. Now I know he busted, of course, but like it's not as bad of draft capital as you think. And like Bashal Tutin was a 4th rounder last year, right? And people were looking at him a little bit more favorably than they're looking at Jonah Coleman. So I actually think that like the 4th round for running backs in today's game is sort of like what it was in the 3rd round, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago.
Moving out west a little bit further, in my backyard, training in Costa Mesa, it's Keaton Mitchell of the Los Angeles Chargers.
This is not an anti-Amarian Hampton stance. I like Hampton. This is just a pro Keaton Mitchell, pro Chargers situation stance. I love the Chargers offense this year. I don't care how chalky that is. I don't care if everyone's backing them. They should be good offensively this year. Quentin Johnston has seen like by the way, as an aside, Quentin Johnston saw like a 2-round rise in ADP out of nowhere the last like 2 weeks or week and a half. I love drafting the Chargers offense, have a lot of everybody. Quentin Johnston, like I said, he's a little bit high right now, so I haven't been getting as much as him, but I'm still drafting him. But with Keaton Mitchell, I just think he's like the perfect best ball guy, where yes, I do think that it being a full PPR platform, I don't think he's going to catch a ton of passes because it's never really been his game necessarily. But at the same time, Mike McDaniel with speed is just check mark, right? Like we've seen it with Devon Achane. Devon Achane's obviously very good, and he's a much more prolific runner and rusher than Keaton Mitchell has been. Even if you look back at collegiate numbers and such, I do think that Mitchell brings that big playability. You get Slater and Alt back on the offensive line. I think the run game is going to be a lot better than it was last year just based on that. And he's going to have some role on that team. Like there's going to be some usage for Keaton Mitchell, and he has the big playability because of that speed. So you will get spiked weeks from Keaton Mitchell in best ball, and that's part of the reason why I've been drafting him as much as I have. I think right now he's my highest roster running back.
The arrow is pointing up right now in terms of ADP for every single member, almost every single member of the Los Angeles Chargers. Hampton's up 2 spots. Ladd's up 2 spots. Like you said, Quentin Johnston's up 17.5 spots since we started doing this. Keaton Mitchell's up 9. Trey Harris is up 19.4. I think people are starting. This is the meme of the dumb guy and the genius who have the obvious thought of, hey, maybe Mike McDaniel's going to be awesome. And the guy in the middle, like, oh, the praise is too much. We can't do it. But like, Mike McDaniel's just that guy. Like, he's going to have a very strong impact on this offense.
I've also had this thought about the current landscape of fantasy football where I believe that this spike wouldn't have been happening until August 5 or 6, 7 years ago, right? Within the landscape, not necessarily the best ball landscape, but like just the fantasy landscape in general. Like there was a delay. There was like a period of time where you could get these players in these obviously upgraded situations a lot cheaper than what's happening right now. And we've talked about this plenty, over the last couple of weeks of just like, I think the market's sharper in the way they're looking at running backs in general. Like the fact that Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson, which by the way, honorable mentions for running back, Ramondre Stevenson and Chase Brown are two guys that I've drafted a decent amount of. But Ramondre Stevenson going, 2 rounds ish after Travion Henderson at this point, maybe round and a half, depending on some drafts, but about 2 rounds after Travion Henderson. It's crazy because most years I would just be like, yeah, get Travion Henderson. He's the ascending player, year 2 guy, whatever. But now I'm getting Ramondre Stevenson because I'm sitting here. I'm like, oh, the market's kind of like downplaying what happened in the playoffs last year and what the situation looks like in New England, et cetera, et cetera. And it almost feels just completely backwards, right? Because like year 2 running backs are the backs that we generally should be going after. It's just not as clean and clear cut. I do think though that we're working with sharper drafters who are playing best ball in May and June. Like we are sick individuals. If you're listening to this right now, you're a sick individual. And, naturally you're going to be more in tune with what we should be doing from a trend standpoint. I think once season long drafts pick up and stuff, we're going to see a different kind of situation with Ramondre and Travion.
Nobody is anti-sweating Ramondre touches more than people playing best ball in June. I can promise you that. They're griping every time he touches the ball. Moving to receiver, a guy we've discussed a lot. He's got a new coordinator in Mr. David Bling Blang Blau. It is scary Terry McLaurin with the Commanders.
I just think that this offense could very much run through Terry McLaurin. I mean, Blau has said that himself multiple times, and there's been a lot of favorable reports about what he's trying to do with the offense. I also just don't think that Terry McLaurin is dust. I mean, he saw his best yards per route run of his career last year at 2.22, his best targets per route run rate at 23%, his best first downs per route run rate, which was 13%. Historically, players with that kind of combination do very, very well against ADP expectations. So McLaurin, I think you could draft realistically, just given the landscape right now and how things have shifted in that like 3rd to 4th round area. I don't have a problem if you want to take him at the 3-4 turn, just because that's when that like wide receiver tier starts for me, where there's just a lot of upside type players. I think McLaurin belongs in that tier. You don't have to take him there because if you're doing a lot of drafts, I mean, I've gotten him at the 4 or 5 turn plenty. But I think McLaurin is set up to have a very, very good year.
Speaking of stacking, it's so funny. His ADP is 45. Jaden McDaniels is a very nice 69. Exactly 24 spots after him. I wonder why it's exactly slotted that way.
And look, it's an easy stack to like, you can usually get Jaden Daniels if you get Terry McLaurin because the person, the other teams are not looking at Jaden Daniels if they don't have Terry McLaurin.
And we might even get a discount. There's a world. I'm happy getting him at ADP now. There's a world where this Ayuk thing does come to fruition, and we might even get a slight discount on Terry McLaurin because people are worried about target distribution.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very real possibility. I've actually drafted a lot of Ayuk teams with McLaurin and with Jaden Daniels. And I think Ayuk is actually not a bad pick right now. We've kind of talked about that, with the guests and stuff, but if and when he signs, his ADP is going to go up. Now, he hasn't played in a while, so who knows what that's going to look like. I'm not having like, crazy aspirations about what Brandon Ayuk might be able to do after coming off the couch and, doing the Instagram thing that he's been doing over the last 6 months. But I do think that like, if you're looking at like just expected value and cost benefit, 18th, 19th round pick, I think it's fine to go that direction.
Back on the bolts, you could probably make this one short. Trey Harris is your other receiver.
Yeah, well, look, I'm fine with Ladd. I'm fine with QJ, even though QJ's ADP has skyrocketed. I think that might settle a little bit. But this is just a cheap play in an offense that I think is going to be really good. Reports are saying that there's going to be a bigger role for Trey Harris. I mean, I think he's the wide receiver 3 on that team. And so there's some role for him to just be used and have, 60 targets or something this year. But then there's also the upside of, him being a year 2 breakout, of QJ or Ladd going down to injury and then him being used more. There's multiple injury outs for him, and it's just a good offense. So, part of this is also like I'm getting so many Chargers that he's just a stacking partner, right? So I have a lot of Trey Harris right now as a result of all that.
Moving to tight end, we've got a little Homer JJ here. He goes back to the Berg, sees Yin's people, and all of a sudden he's clicking a lot of Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah. By the way, 2 honorable mentions at wide receiver. I have Devontae Smith, a lot of Devontae Smith right now. That was pre-boosted ADP before the AJ Brown stuff happened. I was getting a lot of them. And then I still think Ricky Pearsall is a good pick. Based on his previous season peripherals, I think he can play the number 2 wide receiver role. Market Score doesn't love Mike Evans right now. I'm not like heavily drafting Evans. I'm not, not drafting him, but I've had a hard time clicking Mike Evans' name just because of the running backs and wide receivers that go around him. So Ricky Pearsall, I think, is an interesting click. But yes, Pat Freiermuth. Underutilized, in my opinion, in that Arthur Smith rotation that he had at tight end, with the Jonnu and Darnell Washington stuff. There's a new offense, might feature him a little bit more, and he's still just 27 years old. And you're getting him in like the 19th round of these drafts. So again, part of this too is that I'm attaching him to like a late prayer stack with Aaron Rodgers, who I think Aaron Rodgers from a fantasy perspective is pretty undervalued right now. To me, there's truly not really a reason that Aaron Rodgers should be going after Bryce Young, let alone 2 or 3 rounds after Bryce Young in a lot of cases, right? Because like a lot of times people get their quarterbacks and they're at 2 or 3 and they don't really force the issue with some of the like the Genos of the world. And obviously there's stuff going on off the field now with Geno, but like the Genos of the world or Aaron Rodgers or these guys who we think are going to play for the majority of the season. I think Rodgers is going to be the starter for this team throughout the year. And especially because we know this is his last season or supposedly his last season, it just seems like they're not going to just bench him at the end of the year, and the Steelers should probably be like at least semi-competitive, at least, in that like 8 to 10 win range potentially. So as a result of that, like I think Rodgers is just kind of undervalued. And so I've been attaching Pat Freiermuth to him because I'm definitely not getting a lot of DK Metcalf, and I'm getting some Michael Pittman, but not enough to like really force the issue. So Pat Freiermuth is kind of and I get some Jeremy Bernard too, but Pat Freiermuth is kind of like the easy late stack if I'm missing out on that 3rd stack or even 2nd stack in some cases.
Yeah, and when in instances where I'm not going elite tight end, it's a great click in the end of the draft when I just want to fill my tight end room with guys that are going to be on the field because we know Darnell Washington has his role on the team. He's not going out there and running a bunch of routes, right? This is Pat Freiermuth's show at the tight end position in Pittsburgh. Your other tight end, speaking of a crowded tight end room, but a very explosive young player in Terrence Ferguson.
Look, I'm kind of a Terrence Ferguson truther. I understand that. The Zap model liked him. I think he's good. He gave us some production last year down the stretch. We know the Rams are going to be heavy with their 12 and 13 personnel usage. So he should be on the field plenty. Now, he's going to be competing with other tight ends for sure. Colby Parkinson being sort of like the top one and I'm trying my best to sprinkle in Colby Parkinson and not just like be enamored with.
I like having a take. This is one of the spots in the draft where I just like having a take. Like, I don't think this is a part where you need to be balanced, right? When we're in the 18th round, I think you can kind of lean into it.
But I don't want to walk away from the Millie this year and have 18% Terrence Ferguson and 1% Colby Parkinson. Yeah. That just seems like not playing, the EV game very well, right? Whereas could I walk away with 13% Terrence Ferguson and 4% Colby Parkinson? Sure. I think that's a little bit more reasonable, right? And so I am getting some Colby Parkinson because their ADPs are shrinking, the gap between the two. It's really just a coin flip at this point. Whereas before, Parkinson was going pretty consistently ahead of Terrence Ferguson. So I've gotten more I was getting more Ferguson before. I'm getting a little bit more Parkinson now. But there's nothing scary after Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams on this team. Like, they don't have a 3rd wide receiver. They're going to clearly use their tight ends in pass catching roles. And to me, Terrence Ferguson's the most athletic and the most versatile tight end that they have on that roster to move around the formation and kind of be the de facto wide receiver 3 on that team. Right. So I think he's a good prospect. It's a good system to be in. I don't think that he's one of those players that I'm going to be heavy on in season long this year, just because he'll be a waiver wire guy. I don't think you need to draft him. I don't think you need to throw that dart and be like so confident in that player unless you're in a deeper format. But you can, obviously have him on speed dial off the waiver wire. But I think that he can give you some usable weeks. It might not be predictable, but he'll give you some usable weeks just given the environment.
There are 8 rounds that pass from when Blake Corum goes off the board until the next Rams player. And if you just go pass catcher, there's 13 rounds between Devontae Adams and Colby Parkinson. We know the target funnel is going to be very narrow. We know these guys at the top are going to get a ton of targets. but somebody else that has to catch some balls and be productive in this offense.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So it's a really, really interesting build for that offense in general. And I think Terrence Ferguson is going to play, he's a year 2 tight end. We should be looking into players like that. I know people are going to say, but what about Max Clare? I think the Rams have shown us pretty consistently under McVay that they kind of redshirt their rookies, right? Like it's kind of like they did that with Corum. They've done that. I mean, if you want to throw Jarquez Hunter in there, technically they just didn't use him at all. I mean, I think Jarquez Hunter has bigger problems than just,
Undertaker for Jarquez. Let's go.
We're not going to unleash him this year. Yeah, look, it's an L. I like Jarquez as a prospect. But we've seen it happen with them, right? Obviously Puka Nacua was just undeniable, but and they used them, but I think you have to be that kind of talent in order to really be heavily utilized for them. And Max Clare's a really good prospect too. But I think that's more of a looking forward thing because Tyler Higbee and Colby Parkinson could be gone next year. And they know that they're going to continue being tight end heavy. So they got ahead of it in a good tight end class and they got Max Clare where they did. So I'm not overly worried about that this year. I think Terrence Ferguson is set up to at least give us a handful of usable weeks.
Who do you got for honorable mention at tight end?
I think Dulcich was one. I realized I didn't put that on here, but I think Dulcich was one of them. I think I actually had a decent amount of Cade Otton, oddly, which it's just a dude, right? Like I don't have conviction about Cade Otton, The Dulcich thing has been Malik Willis, but also I was drafting Dulcich because he was one of the players we talked about right away when we started this season of the show, where I was drafting him a decent bit. But his ADP's gone up 3 rounds since that happened, so I haven't gotten him as much. But Dulcich is still pretty highly exposed in my portfolio right now. I think Cade Otton was another one that I was drafting a lot, partially just as a late stack. Baker, I think is kind of an interesting click sometimes because he slips, and you can stack him with McMillan and Cade Otton late. Yeah,
and it's also Gunnar Helm or Cade Otton, AJ Barner or Cade Otton. I
will say I've gotten some Gunnar Helm too. I don't know if he is. I don't think he's as high as Otton, but I part of that is again Cam Ward just throwing the dart and getting him when he slips and stacking him in some way if I don't get Carnell Tate or Wan'Dale Robinson. Let's move on to our glorious guest for today. A friend of mine that I've gotten to know since starting becoming a best ball bro, really. He has a great YouTube channel, The Flannelverse. It's Neil Orfield. He's successful in DFS. He's won the Millie in DFS. He's had many 6-figure wins in daily fantasy. He's also a successful best ball player. He actually, last year in the Millie, he finished 2 spots ahead of me. So when I was screenshotting my finish of being 40th, every time I look at that, I got to see Neil's freaking username 2 spots ahead. So he got same payout though. Same payout. It's all the same, He beat me by I think less than half a point. But we chatted about this year's landscape like I've done with the other guests so far because I think it's just an interesting topic. Running backs at the 1-2 turn where we're seeing a lot of those guys go. So I wanted to get his take on that, how he's handling quarterback, and so much more. So without further ado, here is that interview with Neil Orfield. So Neil, a question I've been asking other guests, and I want to hear your take. I'll probably eventually stop asking this to guests, but I think at this point, since it's still June, I'll continue asking it. But you look at the landscape this year on DraftKings, and you look at it last year. Now, last year, you obviously had a lot of success. I won't mention that you beat me by 2 spots in the Millie final last year. I was telling Rich that every time I look at that screenshot or something, or it pops up, I always see your freaking username right above it. So you get to hold that over me forever. But when you look at the landscape on DraftKings year over year, what do you think one of the biggest differences is for this year compared to last year?
Yeah, first of all, I want you to know I was not going to bring up the fact that I finished in 38th place in the DraftKings Millie Maker last year, besting you on whatever the final reception for Puka or Bijan.
How many points did you beat me by? 0.2?
No, I don't. Yeah, something like that. It was nothing, and you were beating me until it was just PPR scamming my way there with both Puka and Bijan on the team. So yeah, I got there at the last second to beat you out, but we made the same amount of money.
Exactly.
It's all pretty the same, 40th and 38th. So the landscape. I feel like there's a few different ways you could answer this question. How has the landscape changed? One of them being running backs are kind of an obvious one, but I feel like quarterbacks to me is almost the biggest change in the landscape on DraftKings this year. And it was already pretty like a quarterback thirsty landscape on DraftKings last year. I feel like that was a big thing that we talked about quite a bit. A lot of people wanted to get their 3 quarterbacks. They would pull up kind of the pocket passing quarterbacks to an odd range last year. But I think it's gotten even worse this year. I mean, we have the range of quarterbacks. You have Josh Allen, kind of his own tier going in the third round. But then after Josh Allen, you've got between rounds 5 and 10, 18 quarterbacks come off the board. There's just 60 picks, just over 60 picks separating Lamar Jackson and Tyler Shuck. Whereas in past years, I think that would have been like 110, 120 pick difference between those two. And then even after that range, so I said, 18 between rounds 5 and 10, 6 more quarterbacks come off the board in rounds 11 and 12. And then this year we're dealing with some kind of uncertain quarterback room. So I think it kind of makes sense because we have so many situations like the Browns and the Falcons and all these like kind of uncertain quarterback rooms going into the year. But then we also have like quarterbacks that we think could lose the job. Jacoby Brissett by the end of the year, Geno Smith. So like it is kind of important to get those quarterbacks. But to me, that's kind of the bigger shift is just all the quarterbacks have moved up so much this year relative to even last year when quarterbacks, people were already pretty thirsty for their quarterbacks. This year, just like the separation between the like kind of, I would still consider Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, like these are top tier quarterbacks. I kind of consider them to be the same tier as Josh Allen. They're going like, there's like no separation between the top tier and the second tier. And it's just like really just a quick, growth from the top tier to like the 5th tier of quarterback teams. Like there's just 5-6 rounds separating them. So to me, that's actually the biggest change this year is you really need to get your quarterback pretty early or you're going to fall behind and you're going to be fighting for some quarterbacks who might not even be the starter to start the year or, have some risk of losing their job by the end of the year. So the quarterback landscape to me is even thirstier than it was last year.
So how are you handling that? Like, are you kind of alluded to it? Are you, I don't want to call it early round because it's not really early round. It's not like Lamar and Jaden Daniels are going in round 3 or round 4 where opportunity cost is a little bit higher. Are you leaning into drafting those players because, again, you mentioned like Tyler Shuck and where he's going, and nothing against Shuck. I like Shuck this year, but like, Shuck where he's going, that gap being closer to where Lamar is and stuff. Is that making those elite guys a little bit more enticing for you?
Yeah, for sure. I love taking the Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Jalen Hurts, like where they're going. It's also kind of a great range to take quarterback because you're dealing with some iffier profiles at other positions. It's like, okay, I can take Drake May, who like I wouldn't be surprised if he's the quarterback 1 overall this year. Should not surprise anybody if Drake May or Jalen Hurts or Jaden Daniels, if they end up as like the quarterback 1 overall, or you're taking Tony Pollard, you're taking Ramondre Stevenson, who's the running going as the running back 2 on his own team, or Jalen Warren. So you're dealing with some more questionable profiles at running back or wide receiver, or you can just take an elite quarterback. So to me, I love taking that range of quarterback, and then you can get back to taking your running backs, receivers in a later round where to me it's a pretty flat tier. Taking the, like I said, Ramondre Stevenson, Tony Pollard, whereas later on, instead of taking a quarterback, in the 9th, 10th round, you can take a Jonathan Brooks, Kyle Monangai, Blake Corum, and it's not that big of a separation in those tiers. So I love taking the, kind of the top of that range of quarterbacks starting around like 5 or 6, as opposed to waiting on quarterback. I'd rather get my quarterbacks early where you're just getting way more fantasy points from. Tyler Shuck to Lamar Jackson is, I think, a pretty good example of that separation. You're just going to get so many more fantasy points from Lamar Jackson than Tyler Shuck or Jaden Daniels from Tyler Shuck, etc. Than, the running backs you could get in that range versus the running backs that you can take later on.
So a question that I've gotten and that I feel sometimes as I'm, doing a lot of drafts and obviously wanting to not get too crazy with exposure is sort of, so from your perspective, and I agree, it's optimal to be sort of at the top of the quarter of any run, but let's just call it a quarterback run, right? Because there is a run that happens from that like 6 to 7 range through around like 10, right? There's this massive quarterback run where if you're getting the guy at the end of that run, especially if it's not, an upside guy that you like and you're just drafting a quarterback to draft a quarterback, you're obviously devaluing that pick, right? So it's smarter to be at the top of that run than the back of that run, right? But the thing that I always struggle with is then getting proper exposure based on what I think is the optimal strategy to take in some of these drafts. Like, for instance, like if you think going running back is like the way to go, especially if you're in the back half of the first round or something like that, which we'll get to in a second. If you think going running back like that is optimal, then sure, you'll get some different iterations for the running backs that you're taking, but maybe you never get CeeDee Lamb, even though you probably want some exposure to CeeDee Lamb. Is that something that you're constantly thinking about in general? Is it something that you're thinking about right now in June, or is it something that you worry about a little bit later in the season if you're doing something like the Millie, where you know that you can kind of even out exposure as the summer goes on?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I'm thinking about constantly, but it's not something that I'm acting on as much right now as it will be later on. Like you said, like, because you and I, we're going to be drafting all summer. Like we have time to even out our exposures if we want to. But generally, I think it's just draft to draft, just making the best pick for that draft. I think it's generally the correct approach because ADP is going to shift throughout the year. And you're going to have different opportunities throughout the year because, ADP shifts like we saw with, we've seen AJ Brown shift from a 3rd round pick to a 2nd round pick. And so, it's better to get him in the 3rd round. And you see that throughout the summer, all these different players are going to shift in their ADP. Now for, the opposite example would be like, I'm not really taking Malik Neighbors right now, but I'm not worried about it because I think Malik Neighbors is going to move backwards later in the summer. We're going to be able to get him later. So I think, generally it's something that's always on my mind. What are my exposures looking at? Am I comfortable with these exposures? But I also know that ADP is going to shift over time. And also just like draft to draft, you can see even right now, if I do 10 drafts today, I can keep my rankings the exact same, but I'm going to have different opportunities draft to draft. So, I might always be taking those running backs in the later rounds, but there's going to come a draft where, like you say, CeeDee Lamb. If you want to get CeeDee Lamb, there's going to come a draft where CeeDee Lamb is just going to fall to you at the 11 pick or something. So you can keep him ranked behind Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Christian McCaffrey or whoever it is that you're taking over him, and you're going to have opportunities to draft him without reaching to take him ahead of players that you like better. So I don't worry about it that much right now. But yeah, once we get to August, if I'm like, I don't really see a big separation between CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown, then I might start I'll reach a little bit and take CeeDee Lamb over Amon-Ra St. Brown. But yeah, for now, I'm not really, going out of my way to even out my exposures that much. Now, I say this, I think that is the correct approach is to not do it that much. I do it some. Like I can't help it because there are players that I'm like, I really don't feel that differently about. Like I had this conversation with Corain last week, Tedero McMillan and Luther Burden. Like if I use his product, I'm always going to get Tedero McMillan ahead of Luther Burden. To me, it's not that clear that I like T-Mac that much better than Luther Burden because I think there's pros and cons to both. So I might sometimes reach and take, a Burden over Tedero McMillan, profiles like that where it's like, it's not that clear to me that this is a different tier of player. So I do sometimes reach a little bit, but I think that the correct approach is the, let it, work itself out over time.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense to me. So also this year, we're definitely seeing more people. I will say, I think that part of like the running back heavy discussion, which is why I love that you answered that first question with quarterback and not running back, because I think it's sort of like the default to talk about the running back. Not to say that it's right or wrong, but I do think that it might be a little bit overblown. Like the idea that people are like going so crazy for running backs right now and such. And like that, like it's so totally different than what we saw last year. I would argue that last year we still saw a decent amount of running backs going early in these drafts, especially because the year before that running back was actually pretty strong. And so we are seeing some, like, I think that part of it is the narrative of like some zero RB bros who are now touting, going earlier around running back is making the entire industry be like, oh man, like everyone's going earlier around running back now, which is probably true to a degree, but there's still some good wide receiver picks in there. But the meta has certainly shifted. Let's just say that. Let's say that people are more okay in drafting multiple running backs with their first couple of picks. So my question though, and this is one that I asked Liam last week as well, is this a year then to zig when everyone's zagging and go zero RB as people are more comfortable with a robust RB approach?
I think that the correct approach is always to just take what the draft room gives you. So No, I don't think that it's necessarily the right year. Like, I don't think that you should be forcing zero RB this year because we don't have the same type of late round running backs that we used to have. So part of the reason that, I was really in on zero RB, I mean, even last year when it didn't really work out for me was because I thought at least last year that there were tons of late round running backs that had really strong profiles. It was, a really strong rookie running back draft class where you could get these rookie running backs late who should have a ton of upside, have some contingent value. Now, for me, I took all the wrong ones. I was taking Rashard Smith, Jarquez Hunter, et cetera, et cetera. Sure. But I know you started talking about Kyle Monungai later on in the season after not really loving him early on. Woody Marks, like there were these running backs that you could get later on. So it made more sense to do more zero RB when there were stronger running backs later. Now you have a lot of the running backs that are like young running backs that we see have a lot of upside. You can't really get them in the later rounds anymore. Like even last year, you could get like a Tyler Algier. So I love the running backs, particularly in best ball, that have some standalone value. Like they don't need anything to happen, and they're going to have some double-digit scoring weeks, but then also have like awesome contingent upside. So last year was like Tyler Algier. If something happened to Bijan Robinson, was going to be awesome. You just don't really have a ton of those guys later on. So if you, and you need to score some running back points early on. So you really can't wait too long, I think, to start drafting running backs. Now I still do some zero RB-ish builds where I won't take a running back until like the 7th round, but it's tougher because we don't have, a ton of these, and you do have some, like Brian Robinson might be an example this year, replacing Tyler Algier in Atlanta. Who knows? Like you can probably find some of those later on in drafts who are going to have, who will have those, 10-point weeks here and there throughout the season, even without an injury. But they're more difficult to find because people have gotten sharper about how to find the right running back profile. So like the running backs who have that, standalone value. Blake Corum is now going in the top 100 picks. Kyle Monungai going in the top 100 picks. The type of running back that you used to maybe be able to get at like pick 140, 150, you can't get them there anymore. So it is, to me, more difficult to go zero RB this year than it has been in years past. But then the tricky part there is it does feel like, we have a lot of kind of aging running backs with a lot of miles on their legs at this point who are going in the early rounds. So it does feel like we're probably going to find some later round running backs who don't have a ton of standalone value, but probably do have massive contingent value behind Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, whatever, and name any of these running backs who are veterans who have a ton of miles on them. But to me, it's like you can still go after some of those backup running backs without going zero RB, because I just think that the tough part is you do need to get points early in the season to advance your team. You need to get some points from running back early on, and it's tougher to find those running backs who are going to score early points later in drafts this year. So I am doing some zero RB, but I'm not taking it to the extreme that I've done in past years where it's like, I'm not taking a running back till the 10th or 11th round. Like to me, zero RB now is like 6th or 7th round is when I start taking running backs. Yeah, agreed. Are there any middle or late round backs that you've really gravitated towards over on DK? Yeah, I mean, a lot of the ones that I mentioned, I've taken a fair amount of Blake Corum, Kyle Monungai. The one that I'm really in the middle rounds that I've gravitated toward is Jonathan Brooks. I can't get enough Jonathan Brooks. I think I've just memory wiped the past 2 years, and just like he was so exciting a couple of years ago coming in, and I don't know, like I'm not a doctor. I don't know how to read the medical reports, and I think like depending on who you read, you're going to get a different vantage point on like Jonathan Brooks' outlook this year. Like, did he actually tear his ACL twice, or was it a repair the second time and he's good to go now? I don't know that stuff, but I know that there are some people, some, Twitter doctors who believe Jonathan Brooks should be good to go at this point, should be healthy. And then we just get such bullish coach speak on Jonathan Brooks. That kind of leads me to believe that like you don't really need an injury ahead of him to Chuba Hubbard for Jonathan Brooks to take over as the top running back on a team that really wants to run the ball. So to me, Jonathan Brooks is kind of that mid-range running back that I've really gravitated toward. Now he's getting a little bit more difficult as he gets closer to the Blake Corum and Kyle Monungai, because to me, like that's kind of the tier that he belongs in. Now I do think that he has a probably better odds than either of those two to take on like the 1A role without an injury, but I think that they have probably a stronger hold on we're surer of their floor, like as the 1B for a guy like Kamanungai, Blake Corum. So to me, that's kind of the right range for Jonathan Brooks until we hear something more bullish. And he's moving kind of in that direction, but he has not quite gotten there yet. So I've been drafting just a ton of Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. I have been too. And some of it is when you look at the way you mentioned the market's been sharper, and I agree. And one of the ways that it's been sharper, and this has been brought up before on the show, but you look at some of these like New England, for instance, where Travion Henderson goes in round 5 and then Ramondre goes in round 7. And I feel like historically that would have been flipped, where the younger guy would have been the easier click, like very much easier, or like Bashal Tutin before would have gone in like round 8 or 9, like now he's going in like the 5 range, like pretty comfortably now. He was more in the 6 range before, but like, I feel like the Carolina backfield is one of the few backfields where like maybe you can make an argument about Tampa Bay if you're really pro Kenny Gainwell, but the Carolina backfield is one of the backfields where like the younger potentially ascending talent. Now, obviously this is all because of the ACLs, but the younger potentially ascending talent is the one that's actually going a decent bit later than the other guy. And like, that's kind of attractive because we're not getting those situations very frequently right now, within the environment. So I love the Jonathan Brooks call out. I think that's he's like if I go early running back and get a couple of them in the first like 2 or 3 rounds, I'm fine with him as my RB3, and then just tagging on a few, 2 or 3 of them later after Brooks, because I do think he has that upside of just being the 1A in the backfield, like you said. And if that hits while you have the other 2 running backs you drafted early, that's a really good stable of running backs for your best ball team.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. He's really strong as a running back 3 who could break in and be like your top 2 running back pretty easily. The funny thing is we talk about this, but it's still like, and it's one of those rare situations where like you can get the more exciting younger running back later, but it's still like you still have to take him in the 9th round. Like we're not getting like the late, crazy good discount. So it's like I love the pick, but it's not like such a clear obvious one. Yes. Whereas there was a point where he was going in the 140s, 150s or something where it was a more obvious click. Now it's like, all right, it's still like, I still really love taking it. I still feel like the profile here relative to the other running backs around, I love it, but it is like the drafters have gotten a lot sharper than they were in past years. So I love doing it. I think he's a really strong, like running back 3, like you said. I'll even sometimes use him as like my running back 2. It's pretty rare though, at this point that I'm drafting a running back 2 that late, or he can, like, to me, be the final running back on like a 4 running back build also on DraftKings.
Yes. I'm hoping that in regular season long leagues and home leagues that it's not that he's more of an afterthought. Like, I'm hoping that we end up seeing ADP in like the season long environment not be, I guess, as sharp, but like, we see a little bit of these changes and like makes it easier to get guys like Tutin and stuff like that than it is. Like, nothing against those guys. I think you can draft them. I'm just saying, like, I want it to be like the most obvious click in the world. You know what I mean? Yeah. Instead of you actually having to think about it and be like, do I want to take on this cost when I'm taking on this player? With the running backs, like we've been saying, like we're taking them early. And oftentimes, especially if you're in the back half of the first round, you're double tapping running back a lot, right? Just because of the group that's there. So I want to ask you, are there any favorites that you have at that 1-2 turn area? I mean, you can extend it into middle of round 2 and even late round 2 if you really like a Derrick Henry or something. But are there any running backs that you've seen seem to go after a lot more in that range, or are you kind of just spreading things out more evenly?
I love Ashton Genty in that range. Like I think he kind of goes at the top of that range. Maybe he goes after James Cook. And I sometimes question whether I'm foolish for liking Ashton Genty better than James Cook, but I just think he has like true bell cow upside. I think the offense could take a step forward. The question is, like, am I just wish casting that he'll become James Cook, like what James Cook has been the past couple of years? So I'm not sure about this, but I really like taking Ashton Genty kind of at the end of round 2. And then, if you can pair him up with Saquon Barkley, I think Saquon could take a pretty big step forward with the new offensive coordinator this year. You've kind of talked me into, you among others have talked me into Chase Brown as being a really strong 2nd round running back target. So there are kind of a number of these 2nd round running backs that I like. Kenneth Walker, I think, is kind of fun. Like just going to the Chiefs. We haven't really seen the Chiefs with a good running back in a while. And who knows how they're going to change their offense, especially with Patrick Mahomes kind of coming off an injury. Maybe they go a little bit more run heavy with Kenneth Walker there. So I like Kenneth Walker in the 2nd round. And then Omarion Hampton, I do think like the Chargers were so injured on the offensive line last year. Like if they can just keep their offensive line healthy, I think it'll be an above average offensive line. And Omarion Hampton was pretty good last year. So I'm pretty into him also. So yeah, I do kind of like that range of running back in the late first, early second round. Like it feels pretty good to double click running back there where, in years past, it's been difficult to do so because you feel like you're getting behind at wide receiver. And part of the reason that it's also easier to just do these early round running backs is like the mid late rounds. There's a lot of receivers that I kind of like. So I'm totally willing to double click those, that kind of range of running back. I'm like, and one that I didn't bring up here that I'm kind of overlooking is Devin Achane, who, to me is like, it's hard for me to do it. I don't want to bet on the Miami offense. And then it's like, he's just going to be targeted so often that I'm probably overlooking him more than I should on DraftKings. Then of course there's the elephant in the room is that I told you last year that I was probably not going to draft Derrick Henry at all on DraftKings. And then he took you to 40th place in the DraftKings.
You still beat me. You still beat me.
Well, that is true. But that's because I had Bijan Robinson absolutely crush also. But yeah, Derrick Henry, he's a tougher profile for me on DraftKings just with the lack of PPR. Even if he's fallen a little bit back in drafts. You can get him sometimes in the late second round, in which case I'm willing to take a Derrick Henry, but he and Devin Achane are kind of the running backs in that room that I'm a little bit less excited to take.
Yeah, no, the Achane stuff is really, really difficult for me. I think he's one of the hardest players to really evaluate this year. I've been doing a lot of work with the draft guide, and he checks all the boxes that you want for an early round pick until you get to the situation part, and the situation is just putrid for Miami. And we do see the best outcomes typically when when these running backs have good team environments, and his team environment's terrible. And so it is something that it's like, how much do we weigh that in the end? I do think that Achane can pay off, but I think he's going to need like a 20% target share to do so. Like it's going to have to be that high. And that's scary, especially with a mobile quarterback. So I'm with you. I haven't drafted him. Sometimes he'll fall. Like if you do enough drafts, he does, because a lot of people have the same logic as we're throwing out there right now. So like sometimes he falls to like the back half of the second round, and it's like, yeah, I'll click him there, so I'll get some exposure, and that's where I'll get my exposure. But I'm with you with a lot of the takes that you just had. Ashton Genty looks great in Market Score. Published that episode yesterday, and Ashton Genty looks awesome in there. And then the Omarion Hampton thing, I need to get a little bit more of him because, and it's not that I was like aggressively fading or anything. It's just the way that like drafts have kind of unfolded for me. But the thing I feel like with Omarion Hampton is that I think the floor is actually probably pretty decent because the offensive environment's so good and that he's going to get work in that offense. But then the ceiling could really hit if things just sort of go his way. Like if he gets like a little bit more of a backfield share than what people are projecting and stuff. And I have enough Keaton Mitchell that I probably should get more Omarion Hampton. So I do think that this range is probably why people have the idea that they have about running backs this year, right? Where like second round, we're pounding them when we don't. Like last year was wide receivers in this range, and they screwed a lot of people, including me in some drafts, right? So I do think that's probably where the narrative is really stemming from. But in the end, it's not dramatically different if you look at the totality of round two as opposed to just the early parts of round two. Now, another decision you have to make in that area is Brock Bowers, because he will go smack dab in the middle of those running backs now in that running back run. And then there's also Trey McBride, who will slip to the early third round pretty frequently at this point. But I guess my question for you is like, on DraftKings, are you going with an elite tight end approach?
Yeah, I'm the guy who falls for elite tight end every year. I'm the goofy meme. I'll effing do it again. I'm doing it again with Brock Bowers in particular this year. It's funny because Trey McBride is the one who actually did separate last year. He, outscored the tight end 2 by over 100 PPR points weeks 1 through 17. He was so good, but like I just have so little faith in like, is it even going to be Jacoby Brissett? Is it going to be Jacoby Brissett in the weeks that matter? And does it matter? Can Jacoby Brissett repeat what he did last year? So I have so many questions about Trey McBride, whereas Brock Bowers is just like, man, he's so good when he's healthy. Like last year, I feel like last year was just a huge, just like forget about it for Brock Bowers, because not only did he miss time, but while he was playing, he played like 3 or 4 games where he was just clearly hampered by injury early in the year. So I think you throw out most of the year for Brock Bowers. And then on top of that, there's the whole, just the offense wasn't working. The team fell apart. I think Brock Bowers could take just a massive, massive step forward this year and separate in a big way from other tight ends. I love the elite tight ends because, and it might just stem back from like, I've been playing season long for 30 years now, and I just yearn for the days of Tony Gonzalez or Gronk and just feeling like I'm going to beat my opponent by 10 points every week. And I feel like you can get that from a Brock Bowers. Like, you can just separate so much from the other tight ends that I do really love going after Brock Bowers that year. Now, with that said, I'm not like strictly an elite tight end guy. Like, I don't like reach to get Brock Bowers, which I did last year. Sometimes I would take him at the 1-2 turn.
Yeah.
Last year, I'm doing less of that this year, but I'm still going to be pretty significantly overweight. The difference for me is, especially with 20 rounds on DraftKings in best ball, you can just take 5 tight ends and hope that, they'll cobble together scores week to week, that it's like the separation of Brock Bowers versus my 5 tight ends. You just need one of their scores every week to like get close to his, to not just get completely bashed in by the Brock Bowers score. So because it is best ball and because you like have enough draft spots that you can take 5 tight ends, I'm doing it less so. I'm not like reaching for it, but if I can get Brock Bowers at pick 20, 21, I love it. I'm always excited to get Brock Bowers there.
Have you frequently gone 5 tight ends, or have you gone like you'll go up to that number of tight ends?
I don't think that I've done more than 5. I think I've done 5 a number of times. Just like you get to those later rounds, and maybe it'll happen less as we get more clarity on running back 2 situations, pecking orders for wide receivers, et cetera, et cetera. I think it might happen less, but now it's like you can get like a number of starting tight ends pretty late, or tight ends with really fun upside later in drafts. I have done 5 tight ends on DraftKings a number of times.
Interesting. I think the most I've done is 4. I'm thinking like from an allocation standpoint, is it for you when you do that and you have 5, is it basically like final 5 rounds? You're basically just like doing that at tight end, and then you have 7 wide receivers if you go wide receiver early or something, and then like 5 running backs. You're kind of going with that approach with it.
Yeah, so I try not to make most of my analysis based around using the sidekick. So I use Pat Corain's sidekick tool from Legendary Upside, which simulates the season and simulates the contest. And I never would have done 5 tight ends in the past just using my brain, like using my own logic. I never got to 5 tight ends. It is because I've been using this tool that's like keeps on telling me. So I did a live draft yesterday on DraftKings where I took Brock Bowers and still kept on getting recommended to take up. I took 5 tight ends in this draft, even after like I was getting recommended Jackson Hawes, and I was like, I'm not going to take Jackson Hawes. So I took somebody else and kept letting him fall, and finally I was like, I guess I'll do it, whatever. This will be my one share of Jackson Hawes. So it's honestly it's based largely on the Sims tool that I'm using, telling me, hey, you should just take tight ends here. You're taking a tight end who's going to score you some points, or you're taking a running back who's probably going to be a 0 most of the time. That was one where it surprised me. Usually it kind of makes sense where it's like, okay, you're getting 5 tight ends, but they're all in the final 7 rounds of the draft. Like that is usually when it happens. It's not usually when you have a Bowers or McBride, but so sometimes I do find that I'm being recommended taking 4th and 5th tight end when I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I've taken Brock Bowers and Harold Fannin and Dalton Schultz, and why do I need a 4th tight end here? But occasionally I just give in and do it anyway.
The beefier tight end room approach, if you want to call it that, makes sense when you factor in what you just said about where we're at in the offseason, right? Or we don't have clarity in a lot of these running back rooms and even wide receiver rooms, but we do get these usable, startable tight ends late that will be able to find our lineup more frequently probably than some of the other running backs and wide receivers that we would be drafting. But then on top of that, it is easy to forget that the tight end can find your flex, right? Like it's not like you're only using that player in the singular tight end spot. Now they generally score fewer points than the other positions do, but there's still the possibility, and it's a full PPR platform where like tight end could match running back in some weeks, especially a late round running back in some weeks and such. So I haven't gotten up to 5, but I've done 4 frequently because like when I can get like Terrence Ferguson type players in the 19th round, like when I feel confident, or Pat Freiermuth, when I feel confident that those guys are going to have some role, I do like kind of putting that together and not having to worry about the position as early. But it's interesting that you've done it, based on what some of the Sims are saying, even with some of the earlier round tight ends. So it's a really interesting approach.
Yeah, honestly, that's one that's like I never love doing it. Like even when I'm using the simulations tool, I want the team to make sense to me. I want the pick to be like, okay, that's a pick that I like. I want to make that pick. So sometimes I'll IKB off of the sim suggestion, but sometimes I like just to kind of follow, like see what the sims will do, and then try to figure out why they did what they did. So it can be fun to kind of make teams that you wouldn't otherwise draft. Because I'll do some drafts where it's just like I'm just doing what I want to do throughout the draft, and then I'll have a mix of these that it's like I don't know why this team makes any sense at all, but this is what the sims are saying, so I guess I'll do it this time.
Yeah, I love it. All right, I get a question all the time from listeners. Do you care about bye weeks?
Yeah, I feel like this is a loaded question where you want me to answer no, in part because I've heard you say that you don't care about bye weeks in the past.
I want your true, genuine answer to this.
Yeah, my true, genuine answer is yes, I do actually. I do care about bye weeks. I've been doing best ball content for a few years now, and a few years ago that was sort of like my thing. Like people knew me as the bye week guy. Neil is the guy who cares about bye weeks. He's always breaking every tie based on bye weeks. I've become a bit less bye week pilled over time. But I do think it's different to me. It's a pretty big difference between best ball in redraft. I don't care at all in redraft, because in redraft, you can just pick somebody up off the waivers to fill in your bye week, but best ball, like you can't do that. So to me, it's just like a matter of, I'm trying to stack every little edge I can find to beat this room of 12 opponents, be in the top 2 of the 12 opponents in my room. And that's one of those edges that you can stack. It's just like, I'm not going to take a 0 at quarterback. And ideally, I'm not going to take a 0 at tight end. And ideally, I'm going to have like multiple players that can cover every week at every position. So it is something that I pay attention to. But I also acknowledge that part of the reason that I maybe pay more attention to somebody like yourself, like you've been doing fantasy football analysis for, I don't know, a decade, multiple decades, a really long time at this point. So you're almost certainly better than I am at picking players, just like finding like the profiles and layering the profiles together of players. Whereas I'm more of like, I come from DFS. Like I have been playing fantasy football for 3 decades. I've had a lot of success at it. So I don't want to, downplay my strengths also, but I feel like my strength is more in the game theory and try to find other little edges. Whereas I think like you are elite at like picking players and ranking best like fantasy football players. In which case, if you're really good at that, then maybe your edge is actually in just like finding all of the best players and stacking all those best players together. So I think it makes more sense for those of us who have not been, doing fantasy football content and creating a Zap model, all of this for a long time. Maybe it makes more sense for me to focus more on the minutia stuff, the little edges that I can find, as opposed to I just think this player is way better than this player, so I'm not going to worry about the bye week. Yeah,
just another thing for us to worry about, guys. Just another thing for us to think about as we're drafting these teams. All right, one question I do want to ask before I get your bold take, because I love asking about the bold takes too. The round 4 to 5 range at wide receiver, which by the way, we were in a draft together. I didn't even realize it until we were in like round 3 or 4, but we were in a draft together the other day. I loved your team. You guys drafted a great team. Mine was kind of whatever. It was fine. It was one that I walked away from. I'm like, this is at least usable. Like, I don't think it's a dead team. But in that draft, I was really mad because at the 4 or 5 turn, you took Terry McLaurin and Jalen Waddle, and I had taken Luther Burden at 4-11, hoping that maybe one of them would come back around and I could get one of them, because I like both Jalen Waddle and Luther Burden and Terry McLaurin quite a bit. But that 4 to 5 round range, maybe like late third, because of the way that ADP has sort of like changed and morphed, like where, Ladd goes or Zay Flowers at this point, that whole group, are there any favorites that you have from that group, or are there any guys that you just don't like? Because to me, I look at all these wide receiver profiles and I'm like, yep, I can get behind that. Yep, I can get behind that. And I really want the wide receivers in that range so much. And I'm just curious if there are any guys that like really stand out to you, or if you're just kind of even with those guys.
Yeah, I mean, we already kind of like Jalen Waddle to me has been a pretty big target just because he goes so late. So I have over 20% Jalen Waddle on DraftKings. He's the one that really stands out to me. I'm big time. I have 0% of DJ Moore so far since you open it up to fades. I just have not been doing DJ Moore at all. I just like the profile is not great. And I know he's going to Buffalo. He's playing with Josh Allen. So maybe he revives his career, but like he had not a ton of target competition early in the year last year with Caleb Williams playing pretty well and didn't really do anything. So And sometimes I like betting on the like resurrecting the career, like the bounce back for a wide receiver, especially who changes teams. But so far I have not been doing that with DJ Moore. So he's a pretty big fade. But yeah, the favorites for me, Jalen Waddle, and I kind of like the old guys, Devonta Adams and Mike Evans. I think the price is really fair for players who should have a lot of receptions and a lot of touchdowns this season. The more kind of off the wall one for me would be Christian Watson. Is somebody that I feel like I'm buying in more than most, just because he was so efficient last year, loses a couple teammates. So I could see Christian Watson being an even bigger focal point of the Packers offense this year. And I like the price.
Yeah, I just love that range. The whole range is like, I can tell a story about all of these guys. But it's funny. I agree with you totally. Like the one guy that I have a hard time clicking, it's probably because I haven't gotten super crazy with Josh Allen either, but it's DJ Moore, right? Like his last 2 season peripherals have been pretty horrendous. And it's just a scary bet to make whenever it's amongst so many other good wide receivers. Like to me, DJ Moore would be clickable in like the early to mid 6th, right? Where he just goes a round or 2 before that often, and I think part of it is probably the Josh Allen stacking stuff, but also, I people are like, I can see where this goes south, where we're both of us are sitting down, in January and we're like, why did we do that? Like it's a guy who has a backbone that's playing in a Josh Allen led offense. So like, I understand where it can go south, but a lot of the trends and the stuff that has historically worked for these players and like where they hit in this range, DJ Moore does not check those boxes. So I'm with you on that one. But before I let you go, I need your bold take for this season, whether it's player or roster construction, anything. I need some fire from you, Neil.
Yeah, I've been going back and forth on like, do I want to just a player take on like AJ Brown or Jonathan Brooks? I've been toying with the idea of the winning $3 million team has already been drafted, because it kind of ties in all these players together. Because there was a period where all of Jonathan Brooks, AJ Brown, Brock Bowers, you get all of them like at a pretty nice range together. I'm gonna go with Jonathan Brooks. I'm just gonna go Jonathan Brooks outscores Chuba Hubbard on the season and is a league winner, is the player that you need in the playoff weeks.
I love it. I love that take. Neil, this was great. As always, let everyone know where they can find you, where your YouTube channel is, and where we can watch that beautiful face of yours.
Yeah, I'm the Flannelverse on YouTube. It's just at Flannelverse, or on X or Blue Sky, I'm Player Q. So yeah, you can find me at Player Q DFS, Player Q DFS on the socials. Otherwise, if you want to find me on Twitter, I'm just Flannelverse. Or actually, I just launched a new podcast, which JJ was already a guest on, called Best Ball Whenever. Wherever you get your podcast, on Spotify, Apple, whatever, just search for Best Ball Whenever.
Yes, definitely check that out. Also check out lateround.com, pre-order that draft guide, and make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@lateroundff. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.
Running a business shouldn't feel like surviving a software group project. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales. And somehow, none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in, an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, all in one powerful platform. No messy integrations, no bouncing between tabs. And best of all, no spreadsheets. Stop managing software and start managing your business with one unified system. Try for free today at odoo.com/iHeartRadio. That's odoo.com/iHeartRadio.
Here's the truth. You could literally be adored by everyone and then come home and still get completely ignored by your own cat. It's classic cat behavior. But new Sheba Premium Puree is a lickable treat that changes all that. They're protein-rich, made with bone broth, and have the smooth, creamy texture cats go crazy for, especially when it's hand-fed. Yeah, it's more than a treat. It's a fast pass to favorite human status. So feed your cat Sheba and go from totally ignored to truly adored in just 12 days, guaranteed, or your money back. Learn more at Sheba.com.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.